It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the owner of the Dribble Drop Basketball podcast, Christian Mordi. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How's your day going?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to start a basketball podcast talking to coaches?
Well, I would say it started when I used to work at Slam. I used to be a journalist there, and I covered all their women's basketball stuff, and I loved it. WNBA, college basketball. I had a blast doing it, and when I got into coaching, I was looking to learn as much as possible, just to be a sponge. And I know that everybody sees the game differently, and everybody has a different journey. So the best way for me to learn as quickly as possible is to sit down with those people. And so, yeah, that's how I did it.
Of course, how did you know that you wanted to be a sports journalist and come out with a basketball podcast?
Oh, well, in regards to being a journalist, I knew I always wanted to be one. Not only did I know I wanted to be one, I knew I always wanted to work for Slam. So I'm one of those very lucky people that actually lived out my dream. I was one of those kids that had Slam posters across my wall, and I always knew I wanted to work at that magazine. It was a dream of mine, and I just kept getting after it. I kept pushing, and the door opened, and I just never looked back.
Of course, what was your experience like getting to work with Slam?
It was good. I had a blast there. I was able to. They were very patient with me. They allowed me to venture out and really put the women's side of basketball in my hands. And I got to interview a lot of really good people. I've interviewed Sue Bird, Cappy Pondexter, Tina Charles. I've interviewed, uh, I think it's about Alyssa Thomas, um, Tina Thompson, Cheryl Swoops. So I've been able to interview a lot of Hall of Fame people or Hall of Fame caliber players that play people that will be Hall of Famers. So yes, it was a blessing.
Of course, while working with Slam, what was that experience like getting to interview people like the legendary Sue Bird?
I was it was a lot of fun. I used to take a lot of pride in it. I still do, even with my podcast now. Being prepared, um, listening to other interviews she used to have with other people, and trying to mold my questions to kind of for lack of better terms, catch them off guard or show that I'm properly prepared for the interview. That was one of my things, even like when we talked before, it was you and I told you, I said, don't send me the questions. I want it to be organic. And I think that's when the best product comes forth is when you're properly prepared and it's organic.
Of course, what has that been like, obviously being a college coach at a Division One school and also running a podcast called The Drip Drop?
Yeah. Well, running the dribble drop has been a lot. It's a lot. You try to bounce your schedule as much as possible. Um, but I love it. When you do what you love, it never seems like a chore. So I just make it work. And I've always wanted to be at the Division 1 level. And I love what I do, man. I'm one of those rare people that have always done from a career standpoint what they wanted to do in their lives. And um, it's just a blessing.
Of course, how did you come up with the name The Dribble Drop?
So that's a great thing. So actually it's a post move. I work with the bigs, the front court players, the centers and forwards, and it's an actual type of move that you do in a post. But also I thought it was kind of catchy. I thought it was like, how people say in journalism world to get the drop on something, to beat on something, release something before anyone else does. It's called the drop. So dribble, basketball, drop. There you go. So just went with it.
Of course, getting started, what was that experience like first getting started with your podcast and bringing it out?
You know, the experience of it, I would say, interesting. I mean, my process is different from a lot of people. Certain people do an interview and release it at once. I like to build up my interviews so that I don't have long gaps in between. So once I get started in October, you're getting episodes every week consistently. I would like to do it every single day, like a Tuesday, but sometimes you have games and I'm not available to do it like that. But I try to release one every single week, and just try to market it and try to get better at it every single time. Creating shorts for it, things like that. So that's something I'm working on this summer, is to make time to continue to market the product. Because I think I've had some good people on the show that have some good things to say.
Of course, how have you been able to use your coaching experience to help you into your podcast experience?
Ah, that's a good question. I think my experience coaching on all levels, AAU, high school, and now college, allows me to see things from different lenses. And I think because of that experience, I'm able to tap into the essence of what every single person will want to talk about. Um, that's not an experience that a lot of people do have, but I'm blessed to have had that. And yeah, that's kind of how I go about it.
Of course, what has that been like? Obviously, getting to interview some D1 women's basketball coaches and learn from them on how to become a better basketball coach to help you in your coaching career.
That's a blessing, to be honest with you. Like, that's the reason why I do it, is to learn from these people. Um, you know, how they run things internally in their program, catchphrases they have, how they got to the point in which they got to in their career, ups and the downs, because being a basketball coach is not all ups. There's some downs, and how you handle those down moments. And yeah, it's again, it's awesome to do it.
Of course, what has it been like, obviously, learning from different head coaches to help you at Iona as the assistant coach?
Repeat that question again.
Mhm. What has it been like, obviously, to get to learn from different head coaches while interviewing them to then help you to as an assistant coach at Iona?
Well, I like to take notes. I like to actually re-listen to the podcast a lot, because you know how it is. Sometimes, we're doing this interview right now. It's coming at you fast. People are throwing information at you fast, and you may not catch it all, you know? And it's natural. You're trying to respond based on what they're saying. And so sometimes things will get lost in the mix. So I try to actually listen over and over and over again, because there's a lot of coaches that have something awesome to say. You may miss something, you never want to miss something. And, I learn through those people. That's the reason I'm doing it.
Of course, what is your process like to get to pick the coaches that you pick for your podcast?
um, I would say connections with them. I'm a big basketball junkie. I like to watch people play. If I like how they play offensively, defensively, that's the reason why I try to get them on the podcast. When I hear good things about them from other coaches, a lot of people I've had on the show have been references. I've had one person on the show and they'd be like, "Hey, you should interview my friend because of blank, blank, blank." And that's how it happens too.
Of course, what are some of your favorite memories and moments getting to cover the dribble drop?
Uh, um, I've had a lot, honestly. I've really had a lot. Oh man, I've had a lot of really good interviews. I've had a lot of good interviews, and I like when people are very authentic and you walk away feeling something. That's what I want you to feel when you're listening to my interview, and when you walk away. I want you to feel something. Positive, negative. I want you to feel something. And I feel like I'm lucky enough to feel something and learn something from every single person on the show.
Who are some of your notable interviews that you've had in the past?
We talked about this before. I've had a bunch of them. So I don't want to miss anybody, and I don't want anyone to take offense because I've had some really good ones. It's crazy because I just was out this weekend, and my friend Jessica Simmons and May Cunningham, they asked me that question. They asked me some of my favorites. Let's see. Um, excuse me. Let's see. Um, I like Molly Miller from Grand Canyon. She's a defensive guy. I like that. I like Ty Evans from Tennessee State. That was great. Um, I really like Angie Nelp from Tulsa. She was very passionate. Um, Vanessa Blair Lewis from George Mason. That was an awesome experience with her. Um, Mountain from LaSalle. That was great. Met Coach Mount. He's a guy that's coached AAU basketball just like me too. I love what he does offensively. I love how he gets after it. Mhm. I've interviewed a lot of good people. Coach Tillett from St. Louis. I liked her too. She's coached high school as well and worked her way up the ranks. So, I mean, that's a couple of people. Obviously, I've interviewed a bunch. I don't want anyone to get like, you forgot about me. But, you know, you put me on the spot with that one.
Of course, what is that like, obviously, getting to interview those people, such as Becky Burke from Buffalo, that is a first year head coach, and learning what she's doing for her program?
I think it's awesome. And I try to give people as much as possible that's starting a program from scratch because I want them to see in their process of how they're going about it day by day, building the foundation. I think those are all the most awesome ones is when you catch people when they're kind of like trying to figure it out versus finished product. I mean, all interviews are great, but I really like understanding how they bake the cake, for lack of better terms.
Of course, what are some of the things that you learn from each interview to help you into your coaching career at Iona?
From each one, I learned different things from every interview. I would say one thing I've learned is to appreciate every single moment. Like I tell my kids all the time, there's no place I'd rather be than here with you. Um, I, really, really love being a basketball coach. And I think that this is something games coming at you fast, so you gotta love it. And talking to those people, inspires you to keep going.
Of course, for the Dribble Drop podcast, is it strictly only a women's basketball podcast, or have you interviewed men's basketball coaches in the past?
At this moment, it's all been women's coaches because I'm a women's coach myself. So I think that it's imperative that women's basketball coaches have a lane and an adequate lane. I think the basketball game on the women's side is growing at a rapid pace. I think there's a lot of good stories, and I don't think there's enough people telling their stories. And so at this moment, um, it's been all women's coaches. I mean, maybe I'll branch out and do some men's coaches here and there. But for the most part, I would say it's going to stay women's. I'll sprinkle in a couple men's coaches here and there on the men's side, but you know, that'll be few and far in between.
Of course, what is that like, obviously, getting to coach different divisions, Division One, Division Two, and Division Three?
Gap, and it's also a big gap. But I think it comes down to, with me, the administration. How much they want to invest in the program. Are they passionate about it? Um, are they willing to invest in it with their time, with their resources? I think that's what it really comes down to. Um, if your heart's in the right place, you're working really hard, you give yourself a chance. And so, you just really hope that they reciprocate what you're trying to do. But, working at all different levels is awesome. It's a great experience.
Of course, what is that like? Obviously, getting to interview those coaches on the Division 1 level, but also getting to interview those coaches on, let's say, the Division 2 and Division 3 level.
I think it's awesome, because I think one thing I've always learned is, I always say this with people in business, just because somebody is here now does not mean they'll be in that same place in 6 months. Like, you know, personally take pride in interview people from all walks of life. Because things change. Someone could be the, you know, 3 and then be a Division 1 head coach in 6 months. You never know.
Of course, how have you been able to take what you've learned in your podcast, The Dribble Drop, to help you into your basketball coaching career?
In regards to helping me, I would say, like I was saying before, listening as much as I can, taking notes, applying things when necessary. I think sometimes a lot of coaches, they're trying to apply everything they learn, and that doesn't work. Like, you need to learn, you need to study from other people, and you want to remain yourself and things that gravitate towards who you are, your essence as a person. Then you can pull those things in and utilize them when the time is right. But I've just, I think you can't be everything. You got to be yourself.
Of course, for you, what has that been like? Obviously, getting to connect with different coaches at coaching conferences and at games to then interview them on the podcast.
Like, you're talking about coaches that I actually have coached against.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I've I've done a fair bit of them. I've actually been lucky enough to, um, like, for example, when it comes to mind is Gail Folks at Davidson. I interviewed her last summer, and then this year we played Davidson at an event. So it was great to see her in person and watch how she goes about it. Obviously, it's one thing when somebody's telling you something, and it's another thing when you get to see the product in person. So I've been lucky enough to have those a lot.
Of course, what has that been like? What has that been like, as you said, getting to interview the coaches, but then also getting to coach against them and seeing what they're saying actually happen for their program?
I think it's great to see them in real time use their verbiage. Sometimes people have catch sayings, and it sounds good on the podcast, but it's a whole nother thing to see them actually use it. Like, let's see if you really truly believe in what you're saying. And I've had the opportunity to see people really apply some of those things in real time.
What are some of your future plans for your podcast, The Dribble Drop?
To grow, to grow, to help people, to learn as much as possible, to interview more people from all levels as much as possible. Just trying to find ways to market and push it more, because I think there's a lot of good coaches that have a lot of good things to say. And so, the plan is to expand, and as you expand, you can make a bigger impact.
Of course, who are some of your future interviews that you plan to endure and interview?
Can't tell you that. I can't tell you that. That's one I can't tell you. I have interviewed like 4 or 5 people for the next season already, though. Some mid-major ones, some higher major ones. A nice mix. Is going to be all over the place.
Of
I
course,
can't tell you
who are some
exactly.
of the people that you
That's
plan?
just the thick of it.
Who are some of the people that you plan to interview that you haven't interviewed already? Who are some of your dream people that you plan to interview?
I love how you tried to word that. You're trying to reword it. Remember, I'm a journalist. I do this. This is what I do. A dream one.
Hmm.
If I could interview anyone, I would interview Coach Yo from Ole Miss. I think she's awesome. I think um, she does a great job with the team. She's built the program from the ground up. I think she has a lot of good things to say. I've seen her speak in person. I think she'd be awesome. Um, Brenda Freeze from Maryland. I love what she does. I think she has, despite the fact that she's lost players, she's always maintained a really good product. Um, I really like what they do in Maryland. Um, a dream one. Uh, I think those are two off top that I can really think of. Like, yo and Brenda would be like it for me. Like I'd be like, I'd have made it now. So those two are people I would love to have on the show one day.
Of course, what are some of the things that you've learned now that you didn't know before starting the podcast?
Things I've learned from interviews with other people.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I would say one thing I've learned being a Division I coach is the attention to detail. Um, it's so important. The margin of error is so small. Um, Being willing to adjust is so important. It's imperative to success. Um, not just in like how you prepare for the game, but how your willingness to adjust during an actual game. And trusting your players to do those things. It's hard, it's hard. And I think the great coaches do that. They can see something and exploit it and trust that their kids can adjust and fly. So, I think once you get to that point in which you understand preparation, it's kind of like when you it's kind of like when you coach high school and you know what it takes to really be excel at that level, and then you go to like a grade school game, the game just way slower, and that's what happens. You just the game starts to slow down a bit.
Of course, for you, what is that like getting to hear those stories from the head coaches, but also getting to hear assistant coaches and even director of operations stories?
I think it's great. It's great to hear their story. I think I've been lucky enough to, I'm also kind of selective in regards to the people I do have on the show. So I try to get people that do have a little bit more, for lack of better terms, meat on the bone that can tell you a little bit more about themselves. Um, so again, it's great. It's great sitting down with those people and talking to them about their journey.
Of course, what advice would you give those people that are looking to get into college coaching?
Ooh, that's a great question. You got to do it till it hurts, and and by that I mean you have to really be willing to overextend yourself, um, because there's a lot of things that are going to be going against you when you're trying to start out. It's going to be very hard to break through, and you have to constantly put yourself out there. You can't be scared to fail. There's going to be a lot of people that tell you no. All you need is one yes. That's it. Just one person to say yes. And then what you do with that opportunity is up to you.
Of course, what advice would you give those coaches, such as yourself, that are looking to start their own basketball podcast or even sports podcast interviewing different coaches?
Make time and prepare properly.
What advice would you give people that aren't in coaching looking to interview coaches in basketball or other sports?
Don't get discouraged. Keep reaching out to people. Timing is everything. And again, when that winter opportunity comes, you got to be ready. Like you have to be ready. You don't know how many times, on the basketball side, I used to work in music. I used to have artists hitting me up at 4 o'clock in the morning for an interview, and I had to get out to bed and be ready. So you just gotta be ready. You gotta stay ready. One thing I learned is um, the people that are truly dynamic in life that often excel, they know when to turn it on, they know when to turn it off, but they're also like always working in the sense of like when something inspires them, they jump into action. So to compete with a person like that, you have to be ready. You know, of course your family comes first, but you have to be ready at a moment's call to, produce.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find your podcast at on social media and podcast platforms?
Okay. You can find me on Instagram at the Dribble Drop, TheDribble I used to do highlight reels on players across the nation. So if you keep scrolling on my page, you'll see some really nice highlight reels I've did on players like Bria Beal, Jada Owens, Olivia Miles, Diamond Miller, who just got drafted second overall. I've had great opportunity to, interview Angel Reese at LSU. I've had an awesome opportunity to interview and do highlights on a lot of great players. So check out my Instagram, Twitter, the same thing. And of course, my YouTube page is very important. The YouTube is where I hold the podcast. I do visuals, just like this one. I used to do audio, but people like to see who you are. So now I do them on Zoom. So I would say, please just check out the Instagram page and subscribe, so that way you know when it's coming. The episode drops, you get a notification, and then, there you go.
Thank you again, Christian Mordi, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with the Dribble Drop Basketball podcast.
All right. Thank you so much. You have a good one.
Thank you. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Instagram and Brandon Sports Talk Twitter at talk_Brandon. And you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
It's my boy. Do what he said. Do what he said.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.